Okay, today we're working on 9-4, factoring to solve quadratic equations. We're going to start off by talking about zero product property. So for any real numbers, a and b, if you multiply them together and the result is a zero, that means that either the a value or the b value must also be zero in order to get a product that equals zero. So let's take a look at some problems in this section. Let's say that our problem has us taking and finding the solution of this particular equation. We already have two binomials set up and it's set equal to zero. So that means that the product of these two, if we went ahead and FOILed them, must equal zero. Well, with that understanding, then one of these two must also be equal to zero. So when you have a problem that looks like this, you're going to take each binomial and then set them equal to zero separately, and then you're going to solve each individual equation, which for you guys, that's actually quite simple because you have been solving equations for quite some time. So let's take this first one. We are going to subtract 1 on both sides. These two would cancel. We get 4t is equal to -1. Then we divide both sides by 4, and we get t is equal to -1/4. But we also have an or sign because we have to go over here and take the second binomial and do the same thing. For this one, we're just adding 2 to both sides, and we get t is equal to +2. So our answers, therefore, could be -1/4, or it could be 2. So when you do your online homework, you're going to be prompted with some instructions that tell you to make sure that you are separating your two answers with a comma. So make sure you do that. Let's take a look at another one. Let's say that this one, it does look slightly different than one previous, but you're going to do the same thing. Here we have n. We're going to set that equal to 0, and then n plus 2 equal to 0. So since this one is already solved, 0 is one of our answers. For this one, we're just going to take and subtract 2 on both sides, and we get n is equal to a -2. So for this particular answer, we're going to have 0, comma, -2. Now it doesn't matter that the order that you put these in Math Excel for your answer, just as long as you do separate them with a comma. For the third example, you might not need to actually factor a trinomial before you can set the binomials equal to 0. So we're kind of going back a little bit to chapter 8. That's why it was so important to learn how to factor trinomials in chapter 8. So for this one, remember we have an a value, b value, and c value here. So when our a value is equal to 1, like it is here, it's an easier problem to do. We need to find factors of our c value, which is 15, that will sum up to 8. So there's a couple of different factors you could consider, but 3 and 5 are those factors. 3 times 5 is 15, and if you add these two, you get that b value. Since both of these are addition signs, that means that our binomials will be addition signs. So here it is. Now it looks similar to example 1. We set both of them equal to 0, then we go ahead and either add or subtract on both sides. In this case, I am subtracting, and x is equal to -3. Over here, I'm subtracting 5 on both sides, and I get x is equal to -5. Remember, it could be either or. So when you enter those again, you're just going to separate them by a comma. Notice I'm not putting these in parentheses because they're not an ordered pair. They're simply a possible solution. In example 4, you might have to put the equation in standard form before factoring. So in this example, you see that this is not quite in standard form. So we are going to subtract our constant on both sides. We get 4x squared minus 21x, subtract 18, and then set it equal to 0. Now these are a little bit more challenging to do because our a value, you can see, is something other than 1. So the best way to do these that we learned in chapter 8 was to, again, take our a value, multiply times our c value, and that's going to give us a 72. So we're going to look for factors of 72 that would sum to 21. And then we'll rewrite it and group it using 4 terms. So you can see right here, I've already done that for you. I took 24, negative 24 and 3. If I added those together, I get a negative 21. When I multiply those together, I do get my 72. Okay, from there you're going to regroup them like we did in chapter 8. I'm going to take these two and group them together, and these two terms and group them together, and then I can continue to factor. So once I'm down to here, I found the GCF of 4x squared and 24x, and that is a 4x. Opening up parentheses, I left behind that x subtract 6. If I go ahead and distribute this 4x, I can constantly check my answer. Over here with 3x subtract 18, the greatest common factor is a 3, so I did the same there. Notice that we have common binomials, and we learned in chapter 8 that we would factor out common binomials, so I did that right here. We only need one of them, and that left our remaining 4x and our positive 3 as our other binomial. Now from here you can set them equal to 0, just like we did in example 1. And then you're going to go ahead and solve the equation. So I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. Those cancel. I get 4x is equal to negative 3. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 4. X then is equal to negative 3/4 for that possible answer. Over here, I'm just adding 6 to both sides. When I do that, I get x is equal to 6. So here's my possible answers. So when I do put them down as my answers, I definitely want to separate them with a comma. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with homework for online in Math Excel 9-4. Now make sure you're following directions when typing your answer. Definitely use that comma like I mentioned to you. And you will see some more challenging problems when your A value is equal to something other than 1. So if your A value, say, is 4x squared, that 4, like in the example that I did here, would make it a more challenging problem. So when that happens, you're going to multiply the A value times the C, and then look for the sum of those values to be your B value. Okay, so good luck, and I will see you on, let's see, today's Tuesday, so tomorrow's Wednesday with this homework, then on Thursday we'll have another new topic.